Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Insurance Town. I'm the mayor, Heath Shearon, and the host of this podcast. I'm pumped you're here hanging out with me today. I got my man, Martin Mashalov, with us because it's going to be a good episode. We're going to get into a lot of things that you guys want to get into, and I've heard you DM me about this, and we've talked about this with the next level of what's going on with leads and how to translate those into closed deals and not just buying leads and hoping that you close, a half a percentage of those or whatever. We're going to dig into some of that. But before we do, I want to dig into my sponsors and the reason that we're here today and why we're here, because without my sponsors, we couldn't do this show. And so Canopy Connect is your one-click solution to getting the deck pages you need to quote your prospects. And now they have the trailhead. You know, when Canopy Connect first built this thing, they just gave you that one method of connecting with your prospects and your clients with the one click. Now they've got more ways for you to do that, whether it's the intake process, the intake platform, all those types of things. If you're a Canopy Connect customer, go check out your link flow settings to enable the sharing path. If you're not, go check out usecanopy.com/Heath and get your demo, get a big discount. Just take care of that. You're going to be so glad you did. usecanopy.com/Heath. Also, my friends over at OneFort, they are AI for insurance agencies. Save time and win more commercial P&C by automating submissions, quoting, and binding with AI. OneFort makes your life smarter, faster, and easier by automating the workflows. And they work within your email, so there's no platform, there's no software you have to download, none of that kind of stuff. You just got to check it out. OneFort.ai. Finally, offload manual work and focus on growing your book. Also, lastly, but definitely not least, my friends over at Viva. Why do agencies outsource capacity with Viva? Because they're insurance trained, they're licensed agents. They can do the front end, the back end, managed capacity services, reclaim 20 plus hours a week by offloading, quoting, policy servicing, and carrier management. They're bilingual, obviously, and they're licensed professionals ready to handle coverage discussions and bind policies, do the handoffs, all the things. Go to vivavs.com and tell them the mayor sent you. That's a lot, Martin, but I'm ready to bring you in here, Martin. I'm looking forward to this conversation. My man, Martin Mashalov, come on in here, buddy. How you doing, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing great, Heath. How are you?
Man, I'm good. I'm excited you're here because we got a lot to get into today. And so first, before we even get into any of that, okay, tell me first, where are you coming from today? We've talked in so many different settings, whether it's been, I think, coffee shops, and we've been at your house. We've hung out with your brother a little bit. Where are you at today? What's going on?
So yeah, I'm currently in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just the mecca of tech. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just here hanging out, and it's really excited to share what we've been working on and also kind of what we've seen with producers working on our business with my brother called Gridpool, and I think there's a lot of content there that we can really go into.
I'm really looking forward to that because the first time we talked, I was like, man, there's something here that I really want to dig into for my audience. And so I'm so glad that we were able to get this recording finally scheduled and get this going. Before we get too much into Gridpool and whatnot, I do want to take a walk down memory lane here, go through the streets of Insurance Town, just have a little chit chat about you, about Martin, and kind of figure out where you came from and what brought you to where you are today. So let's go back to what made you decide to get into here. Where did you work prior to this? What kind of background and experience do you have there? Take a walk down memory lane with me. Talk to me a little bit.
Yeah, so I studied applied math, so I'm a technical guy, but kind of like my first experience was just working at a bank, like an investment bank, and we were working with insurance clients, like these large carriers, but also brokers, and we just saw kind of the whole landscape of where the policies originated, who's writing them. And, I just saw there's so much complexity going on, so many layers to it. And I think it's just, it just intrigued me. Like why aren't, brokers or agencies or carriers, like there's so much potential for AI there because you just have so much paperwork and so many complex processes, but only like a few of them are really automated and really streamlined. And it's also like such an inefficient, system in the U.S. All these different layers, all these different middlemen, and there's just so many things that you can do with technology. And the first kind of independent projects I was doing, it was for a few agencies automating renewals and certificate requests and just building agents for the back office. But I've just kind of seen that there is like a limited ceiling to what you can do, and it's just as somebody who's studied applied math, I just love kind of the like finding little insights in data that you can just make money off of. And I think like prospecting and just like figuring out ways to find the best prospects out of just a mountain of data, a mountain of information. I think that's what kind of brought me to working with prospecting and building a better prospecting solution. I just love those kind of number patterns and all these different ways that you can find a good prospect. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
With the math that you studied, it's a lot of analyzing data, and it's a lot of analytics in the data. And I would imagine, like for an applied math nerd, that would be exciting for you, right?
Yeah, for sure. So surprisingly, that is what excites us. But yeah, it's just figuring out like it's like my job at the bank was just figuring out like how often an insurance company goes bankrupt. Like how often would they actually not be able to pay their premiums. But it was cool because just when you're building such a model, you really need to analyze everything about this business, like how they work. And that's what kind of taught me a lot of the things about like, okay, like the underwriting layer, but then also the brokerage and the agency layers as well. Because, you look at growth, for example, and, like how, agencies that are connected to a certain carrier, how fast are those growing? And when you look at some of their growth strategies and it's all based on referrals, then, like that's kind of what caught my eye. Like, like the growth rates in insurance are not as high as other industries, mainly because they're not using technology the way, some other industries are.
Yeah. So how do you go? Okay. So I'm interested, like, I understand, part of the story, part of that, but how do you go from all of that and building, as I'm writing down notes here, building, different, prompts and bots and the agents that you were building and for agencies to figuring out this challenge of leads and so many for years. And when I first started in the industry, even working with my dad back 20 some odd years ago, 24, I'm dating myself now, but a long time ago, we were buying leads. They'd be paper leads and they would be this, and it would be, dad and I chasing down some of these leads back then. Like, how did you figure out that there was a challenge there, and what brought you to that, and realizing all the challenges and problems that come into buying leads and getting that sales funnel full and the process that go into that? Like, how did you get to that place?
Yeah, well, I just thought that, from interacting with producers earlier on that, okay, maybe there is a problem with appetite matching and matching the carriers. And that was kind of our experiment. Like it just started off as a wild experiment, let's spend a couple days and see if there really is a problem. And we got a pilot group together. Like a friend of ours helped us out to find some contacts. And
So wait, let's go back a minute. Hang on. Sorry to interrupt you, but let's so the premise was you got an agency that, let's say they buy X amount of leads. For easy math, it's called 1,000 leads, and they look at it and they're like, okay, I bought this many leads. Now your premise was, let's figure out, why they're not closing on these deals. And you came to the conclusion of they didn't have the right carriers or the right appetite within those carriers or the MGAs they worked with. Is that kind of where you were there? Just so I can understand a little bit there.
Yeah. So from like our friend that we were working with, very small agency, we figured out that, okay, it's not a volume problem. It's a timing issue with the leads. It's about,
And that's a good point, because I think a lot of people think, oh, if I just keep buying leads, as long as I close this amount, that I could pay for my next round of 1,000 leads or 100 leads or whatever. And then if I just close one or two there, then they have this math figured out of like, as long as I close 5 leads out of the 100 or whatever that I buy, that I can just keep buying. But you're saying it's not a volume thing. Yeah, there's a law of numbers there, but you could be more efficient with those leads by doing X. And so, sorry, I just got to make sure that we understand that.
Indeed. I just think that, okay, like if you're going to go and call 1,000 leads, it's like, why not make those leads people who you can quote based on your carriers and people who match the appetite and strategy of the agency? Because, okay, you can call 1,000 people and maybe, you quote 5 of them. But if you match them up and you really make sure that you can go out and quote these guys and they're aligned with your agency, and you can research the prospect very effectively, and like that pursuit of the prospect is mostly automated, because it is a lot of homework, researching the client, figuring out who's the decision maker, how do I email them, should I call them, automating that kind of tedious work and matching it to the agency means that you can still call 1,000 people, because there's so many prospects out there, but then your percentage that somebody will actually respond positively to the offer, and at the same time you can quote them, is so much higher. So those producers become so much more efficient, and producer time is expensive. In my view, they're extremely important to the agency. They're basically in charge of the growth, and also just maintaining the relationships with that agency. It's like, you don't want to waste producer time on going on the internet, looking through public records, looking for a prospect or finding who the decision maker is, or trying to figure out, like, would this match my carriers that I can quote, or does this match my appetite? It's just, we thought that there was a much more efficient way to do it based on what we saw at that very small agency. And the reason why we call it an experiment was, I think our friend was managing a very small agency, and we just didn't know if it worked at any other place.
So, you came up with this premise that buying a huge list of leads is not bad, but it's bad in the sense of, if you don't have a plan, then that just buying leads to buy leads can be, bad for the agency, and not as effective use of your finances as possible. Correct?
Right. It's just that at a certain point, if you're just buying such a volume of leads that are not optimized to your agency, you're actually wasting producer time that you could be spending somewhere else. So just buying a random list of leads could actually just be damaging the agency rather than helping at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I teach a lot in consulting with agencies, and even on stage, of niches and getting involved in verticals. And, I was very hyper focused in my agency days on HVAC and restaurants and contractors and whatnot. But you're talking about something entirely different here. I mean, there's just a premise in there, I'm sure, with niches and verticals, but you're just talking in general about matching up the leads within appetite of your agency or appetite of the carriers in your agency, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think, like, appetite's a bit of an umbrella term. It is, kind of what you mentioned there. Just every agency has a niche. Okay, like, we want to quote HVAC companies, or we want to work with restaurants, and like, appetite just means that you can set up, okay, like, who do I want to quote, what kind of industry is it, and then what lines of business do I quote, where do I want to quote them. So really matching up the agency strategy based on, like, location, industry, lines of business, and then the carrier matching is based on the signals from carriers that we assumed. Okay, like, a lot of carriers you can pretty much figure out what kinds of lines of business they want to quote. So if an agency wants to say, I want to quote, HVAC companies in this area, and I'm a P&C agency, then we can figure out on the carrier side, okay, who would fit. And, that first agency would just, manually put in all of their carriers and figure it out for each one of those carriers that they had, not all of them at that point, but just the ones that they had, which ones have those similar appetites, and we just matched it up for them. And when we first,
even within niches, and I would love to hear your thoughts, like going into restaurants, for example, because I wrote quite a few restaurants in my day, and there's a lot of people out there that have that as a niche. There's a difference, in the restaurants and the appetite of, like, a carrier could say, I want to write restaurants, but then there's a carrier that wants to write restaurant with this percentage of alcohol or less, or they only, if they're open past 11 or past 2:00 in the morning, they become, this, and I don't want that. And then if they serve, this type of food, they don't want that. Or if they serve, this or that, like, even within a particular niche or particular focus area of restaurants, for example, there's even carrier appetites that are mixed signals there, because it's one thing to have a restaurant, but then you got to match that appetite with the restaurants that want to write past midnight, that are open, or ones that will serve alcohol at more than 30% or 35% or whatever. And then you got to get the ones that are okay with, outdoor seating versus indoor seating, or I could keep going on and on. Is that some stuff that you found as well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of details in there, like specifically, for areas that have natural disasters. I think that's a big one, because the carriers are constantly coming in and out of those areas. They don't stick around for years. So the carrier landscape is constantly changing based on what they want to quote. So yeah, we've noticed that a lot, especially for restaurants, like in New York City, where I'm from. You just have like an enormous number of, so much variation in like what types of businesses these are, just as you said, and even for HVAC companies and all these very specific sectors that they were quoting, because they were also working with HVAC companies, commercial real estate. Specifically for commercial real estate, we just noticed that it depends where you are. Like in New York, like some areas just flood when it rains. There's just you have so many different ways that you can analyze these individual businesses based on like where they are and like how tall the business is, how old the walls are. And that's just a level of detail that I don't know if the data layer really exists yet. Like, I don't know if we have access to whether or not a carrier would quote something like that yet. But I think, like, if the insurtech industry were to kind of move in that direction, it's like we can build like even more effective prospecting solutions. But for someone who is kind of working with prospecting, it's like if we can figure out like how to match that,
right,
hyper level of detail to what carriers can quote, it's like the solutions that you can make are just pretty crazy.
So what is those main challenges? If you go back to the producer in an agency, what are some of those challenges that you found within the prospecting process? Is that the right word? Yeah. Throughout that workflow of getting the lead to closing the lead, what are some of those challenges that you saw as you were kind of thinking through this challenge? Like, how can we solve this challenge? I know we've talked about appetite and carriers, but within the agency, with some of the people you've worked with, I know you've worked with more than just that one agency now, and you've gotten some more examples and some more test cases there and some use cases now. What were some of those challenges that you saw? As I have an audience now that's listening, like, I'm thinking about my front door and getting more business in the door now, and maybe lead purchasing is a part of their plan moving forward. Talk to me about what you saw and what you could tell some of the audience now of, here's things you might think of. Here's a few things you might tweak to make the world a difference.
Yeah, just one of the really obvious ones was that you call a prospect, and sometimes you figure out that, okay, like the renewal date, is pretty far from now. And so the sales process to actually go and get that prospect on board is pretty long. Like it takes a few months, and it's not the kind of business where people sign up the next day. So it does take a very long time to actually get a prospect on board sometimes, and that's what we saw at at our friend and design partners agency, and just how do we shorten that or at least make it more effective? And I think just following up over time is a very good use of producer time. And that's kind of the first problem that we saw. Like a lot of agencies, they don't follow up during that time. Like maybe you have, the sales process is like 11 months. Like during that time, you should really be engaging the prospect and maybe sending some information to them that's useful, or just reminding them of yourself. And that just becomes a big problem at scale. Like if you're trying to go after 1,000 prospects, like how do I follow up and how do I engage 1,000 people over this entire process? And I think that's just one of the really tedious things about the pursuit of this prospect. That's just from the producers that we've been working with, for the past couple months. Um, it's so tedious and takes so much time.
Which goes back to why it's so important to have a full pipeline at all times. Because again, in an ideal world, I'm going out in September and I'm calling on, clients, I'm cold calling, or I'm picking up the phone, or I'm dropping in, whatever. Ideally, it's great when they say, yeah, we come up for renewal January 1. Like, well, this is perfect. I've got, 3 or 4 months. I can start working on this now and I can get you something. But a lot of times it is one of those things where it's like, I'm calling on them September, or I drop in on them in September and they say, oh yeah, we come up for renewal in May. And it's like, oh, I've got some, I got a longer runway. But again, you get a lot of impatient producers there. But again, if you've got a full pipeline, you just add them to another one for May, and then you just keep rolling with the ones you've got coming up in November, December, January. And so I think you're dead on there, but also think it speaks to that impatience of producers now or agencies now. And I think there's also a lot to be said for recycling the leads, so to speak, within your own agency. If you've had a history of the last 2 or 3 years, even the last year, of buying leads at volume, you should have enough in your pipeline for a full year, if you got, enough activity going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, like we started with just new business triggers, like figuring out, okay, like if a new business is created, like what kind of information signals that they would need insurance. So that was our starting point, really. Just,
Yeah, that's interesting. I
maybe.
like the triggers thing. So talk to me a little about some of these triggers that you guys found. And we can lead into kind of what you guys are doing over there at Gridpool. But as you guys were researching this and working through some of your beta testing and whatnot, what are some of those triggers and what led you to dig in deeper on those?
Yeah, I think just our design partner was just he was looking for a more like creative way to go after prospecting. Like, is there like a way to figure out if somebody needs insurance before anybody else could figure that out? And that's true for like new businesses that are established. So you can think about say like a commercial real estate project, and the trigger would be, okay, like when the permit is granted. So when that building goes up, it's not necessarily like when paperwork is filed. Like you really need to match up to when was that permit granted, when was all the paperwork filed with the city. And then at that point, that the developer of that project will need to go out and buy insurance now. Or for example, like if there's a small business that's created in the area, um, that business can get government funding. It can start hiring employees, which you can see on LinkedIn, and all these kind of signal that, okay, like if a business is hiring a bunch of reps, or is hiring just a bunch of employees, that means that they're growing fast and that they will probably need to buy insurance in their sector. And then you have triggers that are just like very obvious things, like for a cannabis shop, like they have to be licensed. You can't, like you have to buy insurance for it. There's no other way. Like you're just forced to do it. Um, so just like the more that we've dug into all the different lines of business, there are so many different triggers, and they're all different, um, different different strategies that an agency can use to figure out when a new business is active. And I think it's very useful for some of the smaller agencies where you can go out and you can get the policy before a bigger agency comes along, just because you found out so much in advance. Um, but we did figure out that the premiums on those are significantly less when you work with established businesses. So when you're going after a specific renewal date, I think like a larger agency, they prefer to go after those types of deals, figuring out exactly when the renewal date is and then pursuing them 130, 120 days in advance. So you just have so many different strategies that people use to prospect. But I personally like the triggers strategy the most. It's so creative.
I
It's so
love that
interesting.
trigger strategy, and I think you're dead on. I think that's an interesting way of doing it instead of traditional just looking for X dates. I think if you're pulling those triggers, I think that's going to be a lot more effective, and it's going to be a more unique way of looking at things like that. And maybe you're getting even ahead of traditional lead buyers if you based on triggers and then X dates, because there's still that factor of the AOR and the BOR that can come into place. Because, like you said, the X date, and I'm calling on somebody in September and it's like a May or June effective date, you could still go in there and have a strategy of becoming a broker of record there, and getting them to agree to working with you based on, whatever your pitch might be. So there's still that avenue there. So I think if you deal with the triggers, that might be an opportunity there too, than just X date calling.
Right. And also what's interesting is that you can create even stronger triggers by combining different triggers together.
Oh yeah.
Like especially
So
for
you're trigger stacking.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just like if you had a deli or something, that's opening up, or a small restaurant or a coffee shop that just opened up in town. Like, okay, like you see the business is registered now, but if you see that the business also got government funding to build it out, or also got permits, then you just have all these different triggers put together, create a much stronger profile for a producer to go out and actually call that client. Because the kind of feel that I wanted to create was the producer calls somebody on the phone literally the moment that the permit is granted, and then the prospect is like, oh, actually I needed insurance like right this moment, like this was like top of my mind. And if that's how producers are going out and finding their prospects, I think it's miles better than just calling people at random.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so again, as we've kind of talked through this, I'm interested to know, because again, I see a lot of these. It feels like every conference I go to, there's a lot of these .ai companies popping up, or there's a lot of companies that, and it's great. I'm not saying anything against those, but there's got to be, in my opinion, some sort of differentiator, kind of like in insurance. If you're an agency listening to this, obviously you have your differentiators, and carriers are listening to this, you have things that set you apart from everyone else, and you have your ideal client profiles, and you have all the things. And so for you guys, immediately when we were talking, you guys felt different, and you thought about it different than just, hey, let's apply Claude and ChatGPT and create a wrapper over that and just give people leads. You guys started thinking about it from this, workflow standpoint, because you were working within an agency, so to speak, and you had this co-creator, so to speak, that was helping you create this and got in the lab with you. Talk to me a little bit as we kind of get into this a little bit more. How intentional was that for you guys, just to not slap AI on your company and go from there? This was more of like starting with a challenge.
Yeah, I think just starting with a problem is always what you need to do. It's not about like how do I integrate AI. It's, is there a problem, and can AI solve the problem? A lot of times AI is just not the solution. Like for prospecting, I think it's just more of a big data kind of issue where you just have mountains of public sources, and also proprietary sources that we've gathered over time. And how do I filter all of this out to find the 1,000 best people for this guy? And that's just, like, you don't use AI at that scale because it's enormously expensive, first of all, like to run an LLM over millions of records. So you just can't do that. And we've just kind of realized that, okay, like AI has a place, especially in agencies. I don't think AI should ever mess with the human component. Like producers manage the relationship. And I think what's just going to happen over time is AI is going to become kind of the tedious, like the homework layer, research the client, figure out my process, keep the producer executing that pipeline, maybe write a follow-up email, maybe write an outbound email, maybe make a call transcript, but never actually driving the human interaction. Like placing a call with AI is just, one of those things. A lot of these companies that we see are just trying to automate sales, like from A to Z. But I think just for insurance agencies, you need to be very, very human in that process. And AI just has a place. And we've also found, like from our friend and also from the people that we've worked with after, AI is not something that should be replacing anything that's driving the relationship in an agency.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from there, and I love that you guys started with that challenge, started with the problem, and started again within an insurance agency, and starting there instead of starting with the AI and building your challenge around that. I love that you started there, and I tell people that all the time. It's, even within agencies, of look for the challenge within your agency, because just because the neighbor agency down the street is using AI for this doesn't mean you can't. I mean, if your challenges aren't the same, obviously don't do that. So I love that you guys started there. So tell me, so Gridpool is a company that you and your brother started. You have, this agency you've been working with there. Tell me first, let's just start off with, obviously we've talked about the challenge you guys did, but tell me what, if someone were to be looking at is it gridpool.com, gridpool.ai, what is it?
It's gridpool.com.
So people go to gridpool.com. What are they going to find? What should they be looking for? Why? First of all, let's back up a minute. Let's go back. If you're talking to, if agencies listening right now, what types of challenges in their agency should trigger them to say, I need to go to gridpool.com and check this out? Like, what are those things, what are those challenges within their agency should they be thinking about? Okay, I definitely should click on gridpool.com.
Yeah, I think in general, if they're interested in speeding up that sales process, if they've been buying leads for a long time, but you've just been spending so much time on these leads, but you don't see outsized returns, it's like I would definitely encourage anyone listening to try Gridpool at gridpool.com, and also just kind of automating the pursuit of that prospect. If they want to kind of integrate that flexibility in the workflow of their prospecting, like following up while the renewal date is a few months away still, researching the client, just getting more information and being prepared for every call. I think that's a very valuable solution to them. If there is a timing problem and also just an execution problem behind the pursuit of the prospect, and these agencies want to drive growth and find a way to scale with a way that's more data driven, I think that's a great solution for those people.
Okay, so I'm looking here right now at gridpool.com, and it says every policy expires, be there first, know who to call and what to say. So talk to me a little about, it says you guys turn the public filings and they verify your X dates and you change inside. Like, tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing day to day inside agencies within at gridpool.com. Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we look at primarily renewals, X states. So we're looking at just an enormous amount of data in every state of the country and pretty much every line of business and industry, figuring out what the renewal dates are for all of these businesses and then presenting them to producers in a way that matches their appetite um, and the policies that they can quote with their carriers. So our day to day, just is of course on the technical side, gathering all this information, but also just teaching producers, like how to use the platform. I've also spent quite some time with some of our users that have signed up to Gridpool and are using it currently, just showing them like how do I find what the best leads are and how do I organize it inside of Gridpool. So we have our layer that finds the leads, matches it to your appetite and your carriers. And then we have the layer where the data just gets organized. In that layer, like we have a call feature, so you can call within Gridpool. Gridpool creates like a call transcript, an agenda, objectives for the call. And so when you're on that call, you can see everything about the customer just in brief on the screen. And it just prepares the producer for the call. And from all the feedback that we've gotten, people really love that layer where you're just prepared for the call, like you know exactly what to say, you know everything about your client, so that when you're on that call, you show the client that you've done your research. And just during the call itself, like when you're on the phone, just checking off all the objectives. So for example, like ask them what the renewal date is, check. And then like the AI is listening and recording, and then it creates a transcript for you so that on every call you can have a running record of that profile. So that's kind of the beginning of the pursuit prospect that we've created, just the research layer and the call transcript. And then also just following up, like over time, it just suggests like, oh, you haven't contacted this person in a few months. Do you want to send a follow-up? So we've been working with producers a lot just to show them exactly how to get the most value out of it. And just creating these tools and gathering the feedback to make it very effective for them in their own prospecting workflow.
And so what if someone says, I've got a company that I enjoy. I like buying leads from them. And in fact, I would imagine that would be probably even a great prospect for you guys, an agency that already buys leads, already has a company. They don't have to buy the leads from you. If they already work with blank, insurance prospect company, leads company, you guys could still work with those leads, right?
For sure. I mean, we're kind of working on, two different parts of the process. Like if they want to buy, for example, like new business triggers and they're buying renewal dates right now, and they want to try out, going after newly established businesses, then there's always the opportunity for them to go and look at that. I think one of the kind of real exciting things that we've been able to figure out is the cross-selling functionality.
Yeah.
Where an agency can put in their current book of business and figure out, who can I still call from my own book that needs a policy or needs to be insured. And that's typically more effective than just buying leads a lot of the times, like especially for the people that we've been working with. Like the cross sell feature is just like you don't need to pay any money for leads because there already are opportunities in your own book that are just hard to find manually.
And so what, again, being a math guy, I'm sure you have these stats or you've thought about it. So far in the early days of what you guys are building at Gridpool, have you seen an increase from maybe someone that was buying leads or closing at a rate of, 15, 20%, maybe up to 25%? Maybe you've gotten them to a higher close rate. Have you seen some of that yet?
Yeah, so we've been working with several agencies at this point, and also from a pilot group as well, and and we've been seeing some pretty dramatic increases in the conversion rate. So typically you see around a couple percent. Ours is sitting at about 11 to 12% currently of the conversion rate of people that you call and people that you actually end up quoting is about 11 to 12%. And specifically for our first design partner, on average in those first 2 to 3 months or 3 months that they've been working with Gridpool, their commission revenue has gone up 180K. So we do see
that's
pretty
awesome.
significant increases just from the fact that you're able to call the right people at the right time, and then just streamline the way that you are pursuing that prospect. And not to mention, I think the effects, like there are like unmeasured effects too. Like you're just saving producer time. Those producers can then strengthen the existing relationships. So there are kind of spillover effects there as well that I don't think are just accounted for in commission revenue or conversion rate.
No, I love that. And I knew you would have some of those numbers, because I think that's a big thing, especially with, bringing in business and new business and working on those workflows of like, okay, how can I close that gap on efficiency? How can I close that gap from, I've even seen some of that like down to 0.5 point, 1 percentage point, 2 percentage point on close ratios on some of these leads. And then I've seen some people that have got it dialed in to where they're closing at, 14, 15, even, sometimes higher than that, because they've got that dialed in. And so you guys be able to come alongside them. And then also you can change that by even forecasting out 4 or 5 years from now, based on, you haven't called these people in 6 months. You haven't called them in a year. Or, hey, you followed up 6 months ago and, maybe you need to follow up again because they said, hey, come back to me in a little while. Because you get that pushback. You get that, someone that says, hey, let me talk to my spouse. I'll get back to you next month. Or you get that person that says, today is just not the best time, give me some time. Then you can have that AI to tell you those things. So again, I think the close ratio for that first year might be at 2 or 3%. But then if you fast forward that 5 years, I imagine that close ratio is probably way higher than that, maybe even like 5x that.
Oh, I'm sure if we get, if we have more people over time, like we will see those numbers go up. And at that point, it's really about knowing how to get the most value out of it. Like it is open-ended how you manage the pursuit of the prospect. And I think it will get increasingly more flexible with AI agents over time. Like you can change like the instructions and the skills that these agents have. And just knowing like which action to take. Like should we wait 2 months? Should we send a follow-up? So just knowing how to extract the most value out of it, and just really just having it explained to you, I think is very valuable.
Dude, yeah, you're exactly right. I think that you guys sound like you could come in as not just a tool, but also consult with them on their processes and on their workflows. That's really cool. And so tell people a little bit more. We've already talked about, it's gridpool.com, but how would they be able to get in touch with, is there email they could reach out to you, or find you on LinkedIn? How would they be able to dig in deeper with you as far as contact goes?
Yeah, so my email is martin at gridpool.com. So they can always send an email. I'm happy to show anyone how to use Gridpool and how to use it specifically in their agency. So we do demos all the time where we show an agency like, here's the prospects in your area, here's how you can automate that pursuit. So I'm happy to do a demo. Also on Calendly on Gridpool, you can always book a demo with us, and we're happy to show you that. And as well on LinkedIn, if you search my name, Martin Mashalov, as well, you can you can get to my page there and then send me a DM if there's any questions, any interest. I'm happy to show anyone how to use Gridpool for them.
And for those that are thinking right now, I'm gonna go ahead and ask this question for you. But pricing, you guys do, like a trial run on this and give, every opportunity for someone to engage with you Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so for free you get basically 100 credits. That means you can get the contacts and the decision maker and the phone number and the renewal dates and the mod, all these data points. You can get those for 1 credit. So essentially 100 credits gives you 100 prospects that you can call right now. As well as you can also use those 100 credits on doing client research and also placing a call. So those are included. Every feature is included in the trial run, so an agency and a producer can see exactly how to use Gridpool for their process, and there's really no restrictions. Also happy to do a discount code for anyone for the first 6 months, and maybe increase that volume too. Um, so yeah, it's you can try it for free. There's also no credit card required. You just sign up with your email, and we've also kind of kept data privacy and security kind of top of our mind. There's no need to connect emails or integrate any personal data. So it is really just you log in, you see the prospects, you research them. If an agency is comfortable, we encourage them to upload an anonymized book of business so that they can use the cross-sell functionality that a lot of agencies that we've been working with have gotten a lot of value out of. So it's all open on the free trial.
Perfect, man. Again, Martin, I appreciate it. Is there anything that we left out or we need to get into real quick? And I want to make sure that I give you that opportunity to talk as much as you want about Gridpool. But if not, man, I think you dug in pretty deep on quite a few things here and provide some good value here. I want to make sure that I get you back to the private jet on time. We get you back to New York, but dude, back to San Francisco. Sorry, but yeah, dude, I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, Heath. Thanks for doing the episode with us, and yeah, it was a great conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, man, I'll make sure the driver waits on you a few extra minutes here and get you back to the airport. But man, I really do appreciate you, and I enjoyed meeting your brother, and I've enjoyed all the conversations we've had, and I'll make sure I put in the show notes the things that we talked about, and hopefully he'll be able to connect with you on that and just explore what you guys are doing. So I think it's really cool and pretty next level when it comes to that kind of stuff. So thanks again.
Sure, Heath. Thank you.